Hey guys, before we jump into this episode, I've got some really exciting news. I want to tell you guys about the Wolf and Iron store. That's right, we have a store now. Some of you guys have been asking, hey Mike, how can we support Wolf and Iron? How can we get more involved? What can we do to help you out and say, hey, we're thankful for doing this and get the word out? Well, we've got a store now and we're launching with some t-shirts. So right now we've got a couple of pre-orders for some different t-shirts. I think you guys are really going to dig these things. I've gotten a lot of good feedback on there. Also, The Guy's Guide to Pocket Knives, the first book I've written is out. So you guys can go out there and check that out on the store. And you can get to the store by going to store.wolfandiron.com. And look, if you use the code FEEDTHEWOLF, you'll save 10% off of your orders. That's kind of like not having to pay taxes, although you still have to pay taxes, but you get what I'm saying. Use the code FEEDTHEWOLF, save 10%. Go out there, grab yourself a t-shirt, and do it with the while they're still pre-ordered, because that way we'll know exactly what to get in terms of when we send these off to the printers. We'll know what sizes to get, make sure everybody gets exactly what they're looking for. I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks so much for the support. And once again, that's store.wolfandiron.com. Now on with the show.
Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com, and I'm glad you're here. Men, before we jump into this episode, I wanted to take a moment to tell you about our online Facebook group called the Wolf and Iron Community. You guys can join this. It's absolutely free. Head over to wolfandiron.com/thegroup, and that'll take you over to our Facebook page. There are a few questions for you to answer there, a bit of a gate, if you will, to make sure we let the right ones in. Answer those questions, and you'll be most likely admitted to the group. It's a fantastic way to connect with other like-minded men such as yourselves that are wanting to take action in their lives, to heed that high call, and to be something better than the status quo. Once again, that's wolfandiron.com/thegroup. Now on to this episode. Now I could count on two hands the number of men that I've known who have had to take a break, including myself, from exercise for a pretty long period of time because we've jacked up our feet. We've got plantar fasciitis or something like that. There's something wrong with our ankles. Our knees are busted up. We've got all kinds of back issues. And we all get the same story. You go to the doctor, you go to a podiatrist, you go to a sports doctor of some kind, and they say, you've got, tendon issues, you've got poor quality feet or bad shoes. And what do? They say, here's some orthotics for you, or go out and buy a really, really special and expensive shoe to run in, which just makes you feel like you're just clomping around. Now, I share a little bit of my story in this here, so you'll get to hear more about what's going on with me and running and my feet and that kind of stuff. But today's guest is going to be the guy to follow regarding barefoot running. His name is Thomas Hughes. He's from the UK, so he's got a fun accent. Well, if you're not from the UK, he's got a fun accent. And today's conversation is all about your feet, barefoot running, barefooting in general, how your feet are designed to work, and what are the things that shoes don't allow your feet to do that they ought to do that are actually making your feet weaker. So we talk about things like your foot basically being in a cast for the most of your life. And then when you try to use your feet to do the things that your feet should do, they don't work. Surprise, surprise. And Americans are having this problem like crazy because not only do we sit down more than ever, but we use and are told to go towards these soft, comfy shoes in every situation in life. Now, you guys may have been following along with me a little bit. When I quit my job back in June, I actually decided to go barefoot for the most of my day. So I intentionally don't wear shoes the majority of the day. Even when I'm out in the shop and I'm doing work, I'll put on some flip-flops if I need to go to the store or something like that. But it's to help build strength back in my feet, the strength that's not there. And once again, I'll share more of my story when we start this thing out. But this is really, really great, guys. And you know what? It's still kind of something that's sort of revolutionary, if you want to call it. It's not really a revolution, but it's new. And not everybody's doing this. You see people, outside walking without shoes. A lot of people will comment on it and say, why do you not have shoes on, right? But getting out of the mindset of how our society functions today and getting back into the mindset of how are we supposed to function as individuals, as human beings. And Thomas Hughes just does a fantastic job. He's one of those guys that has such a passion about the subject. And so without further ado, here's Thomas Hughes. Mr. Thomas Hughes, thank you so much for joining me on the Wolf and Iron podcast.
No problem. Glad to be here.
So I'm really interested to talk to you. I know the guys that are listening to this are going to get a lot out of this episode as well, but I'm kind of doing this somewhat selfishly because I've started going down the barefoot track, recently actually. I've been a proponent of doing barefoot things for some time, but essentially I'll give my story a little bit to you first and to the guys who maybe don't know me that well, and then I'll let you give your story because I know you have a similar story, even though you're more athletic than I ever, have been. But essentially, I grew up in the country, running around in the grass and the dirt and that kind of stuff, like any other kid would do back in the 80s and 90s. But then began wearing shoes and that kind of stuff. I went to, as far as running and stuff goes, I began getting into probably any kind of serious running was when I was in the Navy. Went through boot camp. We're doing 1.5 miles, and then we started working out with the Marines, and so we're doing 5 miles or so. And I did okay. I mean, I've never been a great runner, never been a fast guy, but I was able to get through it. When I got into my 30s, I noticed that I had issues with my arches, particularly on my left foot. I rolled my ankle a couple of times in a few different runs that were the like trail runs, right? So you hit a root, you hit an odd place, rock or something like that, rolled my ankle pretty badly a few times. And eventually just had issues after issues. And I've been through orthotics. I've been through specialized shoes. I've, spent all kinds of money on trying to fix the issue. And one of the things that every doctor I went to, every foot specialist I went to, they said, your feet are weak. This is really the thing he would say to me. He said, your feet, he didn't say you need to get out of shoes. He just said, you have weak feet and they're not made for running. And to me, that meant, well, from the doctor's perspective, that meant you just need to stop running. But for me, that said, no, I need stronger feet. That's the issue. And so I began to look into this more barefooting stuff, barefooting lifestyle, and barefoot running. And since June, I quit my job back in June. So I had a regular desk job for the most part. Quit that back in June, and I've been going barefoot just about, probably 98% of the day, as much as I can get away with. And most of my pain is gone in my feet. I can tell they're getting stronger, but I still have some issues. And so I actually heard you on another podcast. I said, I've got to get this guy on here because I want to pick his brain on all the barefoot running stuff and really understand more about the feet mechanics. And then, of course, I thought if I'm dealing with this, there's going to be a lot of guys out there that are dealing with the same thing that need to hear this information. And so that's my story. But now give us an insight into what you do and maybe your story and how you kind of got shifted more towards the barefoot running.
Okay, well, I mean, my kind of that story on that sort of thing starts probably about a decade ago now. I was always a runner when I was younger. I was always a runner at school, kind of doing track, and I ended up stopping running when I went to university, mostly because they didn't have a track team, and they didn't have a track. They didn't do any of the kind of athletic stuff. I got more back into football again and started playing that. So I stopped kind of running for a while. And then decided, basically, I was towards the end of university, I got into triathlon, or someone introduced me to triathlon. So I started running again. And found I picked it back up again quite easily. But one thing I always found is that I always had problems with my feet all the time. And I always knew that I looked at my feet and they're relatively wide. And all these kind of shoes I was wearing, I was going to do the usual thing is I was going to a running shop, looking at what looked good, basically, what was normally red and bright colours, and I'll have that one.
Right.
Yeah. And I ended up with these racing flats. And I, to be honest, I started getting back into triathlon. I remember doing a triathlon. Probably a good decade ago now. And it was a 6 mile run. So it was Olympic distance, 6 mile run at the end. And I finished that race with bleeding feet, with blisters and everything everywhere. And I thought, this isn't right.
Yeah.
I can barely, I got to the point where I could barely run a mile down the road without being in pain from my toenails, from my blisters. And I guess I started to really, and it came to a head once when I did a half marathon. And I'd been training in a slightly wider fitting training shoe. On race day, I looked down and I thought, do you know what? I thought to myself, I'm going to try and win this race, because it was a race that I'd come relatively close before to winning. And I thought, I'm going to try and win this race. So I looked down and I had my racing flats that were kind of half the weight, but they were a little bit narrow. But I didn't really think about things like that back then.
Yeah.
And, so I put on my racing flats and I thought, right, we'll go with these. And I'd never worn them for anything longer than a few miles before. So we start out and start the race, and it all was going really well. I was right at the front, absolutely comfortable. We'd gone through kind of six miles in kind of sub 110 half marathon pace. So we're going at a good pace. Everything was fine. And then it got to about 6 miles in, and I suddenly, without, it came on really quickly. Every time I landed, I had searing pain in my feet, just constantly. And it started off on one foot, then it went to the other foot. And it got to the point where I dropped down to kind of 5th, 6th place and wasn't too far behind the leaders, but was starting to drop back. And it got to the point where I knew the area really well, and I knew the people. And I said, the next person I see that I know, I'm going to stop, I'm going to pull out, and I'm going to get a lift home, because this is so painful, this is not worth it anymore. Yeah. I didn't see anybody. Got to about mile 8, 9 and thought, you know what, I can probably finish this now. So I carried on, and I was in every footfall was painful. I wasn't even breathing hard because I couldn't anymore. I couldn't run fast enough because I was in so much pain. And I came across the line, and I stayed in about 5th place, came across the line and literally sat down straight away. And I remember my now wife coming over to me, and I took my shoes off, and my white socks were now red.
Wow.
They were literally bright red. And I said, I'm not taking my socks off because I don't know I'm going to find underneath.
Yeah.
And we kind of she helped me get back to her house, which was only about a mile away. We started having a look, and there was a lot of damage. Toenails, everything was all like half my beard. There was blisters and bleeding everywhere. And I thought, this isn't right at all. And we kind of cleaned everything up, and I went to work for the next couple of days. And I woke up. I was away working at a hospital away from home, and I woke up, and I went to get out of bed, and I went to stand up, and suddenly I couldn't stand, and I almost fell over. And I looked down, and my feet and my toes and everything was so swollen that I had to go into the A&E, the accident emergency department at the hospital I was working at. Yeah. At which point all my toenails removed.
Wow.
And which wasn't actually the worst part of it. Actually, it's a bit of a funny story. I have a very low heart rate, and I'd neglected ever to. I now wear a wristband that tells people, because my heart rate drops to about 28, if not sometimes lower. Which, having worked in cardiology, that's the kind of heart rate where you normally put a temporary or a pacemaker in, so on, basically.
Wow. Yeah.
So it dropped right. Anyway, I was having my toenails removed. I promptly passed out because I didn't realise I had an actual allergic reaction to the local anaesthetic. That I then woke up to being jumped on by a bunch of doctors who thought I was going to basically go into cardiac arrest because my heart dropped so low. Anyway, so beside that embarrassing story, I ended up with having all my toenails removed and having to have them rebedded. And it was about 6 months before I could really do anything again. I could barely walk because of the damage I'd done, and it was all down to the shoes. Yeah. And it started to make me think, I said, this running's not worth it. That's it. I'm not running anymore. I'm not doing triathlon anymore. It's not worth the damage. And then I don't know where I saw them, but I saw these shoes that were shaped like feet. And at the same time, I was reading Born to Run.
Right.
And well, these are the Vibrams. So I thought, right, well, maybe I should give those a try. Maybe this would solve my blister problems. And I went, and I remember the first time I went to try these shoes on, and I couldn't get them on. I was sat in a shop, and the shop assistant was staring at me, and I literally, if anyone has ever out there put Vibrams on for the first time you put them on, you can't get them on because you realise that your toes
are so close
don't
together.
Work anymore.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they don't move. You think it's like putting on a glove, but it's like on a glove with a hand that is completely frozen, doesn't move.
Right.
And it's really, really tough. Yep. So I sat there in the shop trying to get these shoes on, and I end up walking out. I actually end up having a bit of a kind of meltdown because I was like, I can't get the things on. Right, that's it. I'm not getting them. I'm walking out. And then my wife says, you really want these? We've come all the way here to get them because they were really rare, and you can barely find them anywhere now. Like, they were rare back then.
Yeah.
But since the lawsuit, they don't sell them in this country pretty much at all anymore.
Oh wow.
Every shop, no shop in the high street will carry them anymore because of the lawsuit, because they had so many returns. So anyway, I went back in. I managed to get them on, and so I got these shoes on, and I absolutely loved them. And I suddenly, within a week, I discovered we'd had a bit of a heat wave, and so I was getting up before work, which was normally kind of 5, 6 in the morning, which was really unusual for me because normally I just get up, go to work, and I do my running in the evening. But I was running, and I was running twice a day, and it was the first time for such a long time I really enjoyed running. I just absolutely loved it, and I was running all over the place. I was running on, and these Vibrams were just amazing. Yeah. And I was suddenly completely sold on it, because I finally had a shoe that actually fit my foot. And then a week later, searing pain in my ankle. Like I had this searing pain right at the back of my Achilles in my ankle. I thought, oh no, what have I done? I've done too much too fast.
Yeah, right.
Got right into it. I got really excited. I've done too much. And so what it turned out was I had a problem with something called the retroperitoneal bursa, which is a little sac of fluid. And I worked that out within a couple of days because it was relatively obvious where the pain was. And I still can't quite work out what made me do it, but about a week later, I wandered down to the local park and I just jogged barefoot around the grass.
Right.
And there was no pain. And I ran back on road and there was pain. And I ran on the grass and there was no pain. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And at the time, a friend of mine had a bit of an Achilles problem. And he said, oh, well, I'm getting this issue. Maybe that would help me.
Yeah.
And he came and we jogged together and he had no pain either. And I was like, this is really strange. Is it because suddenly having that sensation on the bottom of your foot made you do things better, run better, control the foot better? So basically it went from there. So that kind of started me on a trajectory of changing my whole life course, leaving medicine, getting into research, looking at the barefoot and how it works and how it moves, and then basically moving up to the point which I am today, which is running analysis kind of studio and company based in the UK, at the same time as trying to develop a shoe that will try and replicate the barefoot condition for when we run basically on tarmac. So that's kind of, so it all kind of started off at that point where I had this kind of realization that I couldn't fit into normal shoes, that normal shoes were causing so much damage to my feet, but also completely ruining my love of the sport.
Yeah.
And that by taking them off or going for something that had that ability to, basically not support my foot in a way of support like a shoe support, but also just give it what it needed, which was just the protection on the bottom, suddenly everything changed. So that's kind of what's happened.
So let me ask this question then, because we typically hear about people who are like, from a nutritional standpoint, somebody might say you should never eat grains. Like no human being on earth should ever eat any kind of grain, right? And you got those people, and then you got some people who say, well, it's okay for some people whose ancestors ate grains, it's okay. Let's apply that to shoes. Are there some people who, that shoes are the right thing for them? They need shoes. Or would you be in the camp of like, nobody really needs shoes except for, just getting around on asphalt, that kind of stuff, unfortunately today. But mechanically, biologically, we're not designed to have shoes. Where would you kind of stand on that?
I'm on the thought that we're not meant to have shoes, and that we actually... But the thing is that actually, we have obviously so much, as you say, the tarmac, asphalt and glass and the things that mean that protection on the bottom of the foot is quite important from that standpoint. I know there are tribes and places in the world where they don't wear shoes at all, and that they have the bottom of their feet is so hard that they could walk around on glass, they could walk around on all those surfaces and have no problem. I know I spend most of my time without shoes. I spend most of my time at work, but I walk outside. If I don't need to put on shoes, I don't feel like I need to put on shoes, I don't put them on them. The bottom of my feet is relatively hard, and I can step on things, and not probably a full piece of glass or something like that would cut my foot. But most things like stones, they don't bother my feet at all. Whereas you see people that they can't even stand on tarmac without their feet being sensitive because they're in shoes all the time. So that's the kind of argument from that perspective. But also, I think the thing is that it's. But there are areas now. You look at the kind of Tarahumara Indians based in the Copper Canyon, and they wouldn't be able to run without wearing their kind of sandals, simply because the ground is those rocks and the plants are they're so sharp and they're so that it would be dangerous for them to be able to run on those surfaces. However, they could probably walk on them. They probably could, because of the amount of pressure would be less, and they probably wouldn't do that essentially any damage. The thing is that we don't need much in the way of shoe. We just need that protection for the bottom of the foot, really. And that's the thing, is that it's all very much kind of what you get used to. But again, if you get used to having cushion, you get used to that comfort and that protection, you just get used to it. It's the same way, we're talking about kind of things like orthotics and kind of supports in shoes, is that the biggest problem is getting used to them. And it's the same issue we have with things like sitting. The sitting isn't the problem. It's right. Sitting in one position that we get used to that is the problem. then our, essentially it's it becomes kind of brain derived. Our brain almost locks us in that position. So when I see people in kind of my clinic in terms of sitting, and if they have sitting jobs, so it's not the sitting they have to worry. One thing they have to worry about is what they're sitting in. If they're sitting in a chair that is like an orthotic for their back, i.e. it's an office chair with a lumbar support, it makes them weak. Exactly. That's the thing is the experience you found when you went to the doctors. They said you had weak feet.
Right.
And your reaction to that was as it should be, which is, well, I need to make them stronger.
Sure.
As opposed to their reaction, which tends to be, oh, well, just give them more comfort or give them more support. And that's the same thing, office chairs and lumbar support has caused more back issues in people. I can pretty much guarantee it.
Yep.
And I see this on a daily basis, is they're more comfortable when they're in their chair. The same way that someone who has a foot or has, basically weak feet will be more comfortable in their orthotic. However, when they're not in their orthotic or when that person is not in their office chair, they are weaker and they are in more pain. And they often sleep worse. They sleep more on their side because they have to curl their knees up because they're in that kind of fetal position. Now, that fetal position, if you've got a nice soft mattress, which is what you should have, this idea of a hard, firm mattress is complete rubbish. It's awful for the back. But if you're on a relatively soft mattress, you can kind of get away with it. But what it causes is that they spend their whole life in that fetal position. And then they try and run, and they can't. They can't run because they can't stand upright anymore.
Wow.
Because the brain gets stressed and actually then sit down when they run because their brain is so stressed that they can't go upright anymore. That's not normal for them. And so the same with shoes is that, you get used to your shoe, you get used to that support, you get used to the comfort, and a change feels wrong. However, you get used to it and it feels normal again. I mean, I when it comes to kind of running, so you say about kind of people getting used to shoes is that you get used to your running shoe cushioning.
Mm-hmm.
I can run a marathon with no cushioning at all. I could run a marathon in Vibrams because I'm used to no cushion. However, most people would not be able to do that. They just wouldn't tolerate it at all. And their body would break down and their brain would say this is wrong because this is painful. But it's because they haven't got used to having to basically read those sensations, actually use them to their advantage and use them to come back on foot again as opposed to absorbing them. So it's all very much what we get habitually used to.
Yeah. So let me talk about then, let's go to the mechanics of the feet, that the shoes are either not allowing the foot to utilize, right? Or they're kind of boxing. I've heard the shoes called as like a cast for the foot, I've heard them referred to like that. So what are the mechanics of the feet that normally you would express and you would have, mobility and dexterity, whatever, that kind of stuff, where you don't have that with a shoe? Do you have any examples of that?
Well, there's a few things. So what I was actually, one of the main things I was studying was things like, as the foot comes into land as we're running, how much movement there is in the bones. And just to give you a good example, so I measured by putting a marker. So if you look at your foot, get everyone to kind of look at their foot, okay. And you've got, obviously you can see your toes, and then back from your toes, where if you look at your big toe, you kind of see that it goes in at the back of the side of your toe on the inside, and it goes out again.
Right.
And then you've got basically a head of the bone there. So that's the head of the metatarsal. So and if you feel on the bottom of your foot, you should be able to feel that there are 5 balls underneath the ball of the foot, which is the 5 heads of the metatarsals. All right?
Okay.
So when you come into land, when you run, those bones spread basically outwards, so they spread laterally. Now, I put a marker on the first metatarsal, so that big toe one, and the 5th metatarsal, the little toe one.
Yeah.
And what I measured was that, and this was without exception, this was across small women to large men, that spread was between 1 and 2 centimetres. So, basically almost, so got up towards an inch. As you land, those bones actually spread. And the width of the foot spreads by between 1 and 2 centimetres. And if you imagine how that's huge.
Yeah.
That is a huge amount of spread.
Yep.
And that's so that's just that direction. So as you land, as you're both walking and running, your foot is conforming to the ground. A lot of people think that if they look at the foot, they think it's just one slab. And it's not. It's broken up into kind of, you've got your forefoot, your midfoot, and your rear foot, and they corkscrew on each other. Now, this is obviously most exaggerated when we run. But the thing is it also happens when we walk. It is almost feeling the ground. It is moving. It is changing shape. The arch is deflecting. And a shoe doesn't allow any of that. It locks you into that one position. So actually, and I find this in running, is a shoe invariably makes you less stable because you lose that ability of the foot to be able to control that movement. But it also does the same thing when you're walking around, is that it makes you less stable. And then what happens is you then put your foot, your very relatively wide foot, and I see people in, as I say, day-to-day basis, and generally feet go from being wide to very wide in terms of their relationship to shoes. Almost all feet are wider than the shoes that are being worn by an absolute, by quite a big margin sometimes. And so that foot is being pushed in. And this is always a phenomenon I used to see with elderly patients in medicine, is that particularly older women, often have what I'd call shoe-shaped feet, is that their feet were now the shape of their shoes. And that's what you get. People get bunions, and they say, do you know what a bunion is? Are we talking the same language?
Well, it'd be for us, it'd be kind of like a blister that's kind of hardened over. Is that right?
Well, so what it is it's something medically it's called hallux valgus, which basically the big toe gets pushed kind of outwards by basically the end of rather than having the toes splay out, the toes get compressed into like a pointed shape. But you get what's called a bunion, which is where that head of that first metatarsal gets pushed outwards, and you end up with being sticking out. So I'm not sure what they call it. I don't know whether you call it a bunion in the States.
No, it probably is. No, I've never had one, and and I try not to look at old people's feet, so I've probably not seen this. But
funny thing is it's very common. I probably say a good 20% of people, regardless of age, have them and have them developing. Yeah, and the thing is, and they always say the same thing. Oh yes, my mother's got them, because it seems to be. It's a weird thing. It seems to be inherited. The predisposition to it seems to be inherited from your mother. However, they blame their genetics, but actually the study that I did, I was looking at populations based in particularly it was Malaysian countries where they have some same genetics. Some of them wear shoes and some of them don't wear shoes, and the ones that wear shoes have this development of these bunions, whereas the ones that don't wear shoes have no bunions at all.
Wow.
And it's because basically you take that predisposition, you add a shoe, and you get complete, kind of deforming of the foot. And you look at that, and people say, "Oh, that's essentially that looks normal," or they think it's normal, and it's not. But what happens if you push that big toe out of the way, and if you've got nice big toe splay, and you look down at your foot, the big toe should sit inside of the ankle position, if that makes sense. And as you go to stand on one leg, you notice how the big toe flattens and kind of grips the floor and provides a really stable platform. Your foot is a triangle.
Sure.
It provides a really stable platform at the front. Now, if you take that big toe and you push it basically towards the other toes, which is what happens in a running shoe, it completely destabilizes the foot and the arch. So you lose a lot of that balance and stability. So you rock all over the place.
No, this is great because I'm looking at my feet right now as you're saying this, and I have, you say, a foot's a triangle, and that's how if I were to draw a foot, that's kind of how I would draw it, right? But if I look at my feet, they're very narrow. This is actually something that doctors have told me, sports professionals, hey, you have narrow feet, you don't need to be running, right? And we kind of talked about that already. But if I look at my feet, it's more of like a rectangle, not a triangle, right? And so you mentioned, I think I'd heard you say in another podcast, that your feet actually changed shape as you began running, doing more barefoot running. Is that correct?
Yeah, they got wider.
Okay.
This is something that was in the literature. This is actually something that I was planning on studying kind of as part of a long-term project, but unfortunately we couldn't really do it because of the logistics of trying to study people and get them to barefoot run and not wear certain shoes and all this kind of stuff. But it was reported in a paper in 1984 that they actually monitored this and found that most people's foot got wider, it got shorter because of the arch basically increased in height, and that shows that the foot is not a fixed structure. It got shorter because the arch got higher and pulled in almost pulled in the forefoot, rather than it all kind of, and actually they lost a few sizes, which was really quite interesting. But I mean, it's partly because I've gone to shoes that are more appropriately shaped. But I've gone from a UK 10.5 to a UK kind of 9 to 9.5 because my foot has shortened slightly because the arch has become higher, but also it's significantly widened around those metatarsals because what tends to happen is the foot becomes narrow when we wear shoes all the time because those metatarsals don't spread as much. So therefore, when we're standing and weight bearing, you look down, then the foot looks quite narrow.
Sure.
And there's all this gristly, fibrous tissue between those bones that holds it all together. So when people start doing a lot of barefoot activity, sometimes they get aching pain in their feet. And it's these fibrous tissue that's kind of breaking apart. And then they notice their foot's getting subtly wider. Might only be a kind of, half a centimetre. But often it happens as the tissue spreads. And it's basically because and it shows you how if you took all the outside of the foot off, essentially a foot is like a webbed version of a hand. That's it is actually the hand, the amount of the movement the hand can go through is the same amount of movement the foot can go through. We just look at it as this kind of, as I say, this big slab when it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that, so actually it has that ability to move and change the same way that a kind of hand would if it was stunned, liberated. You could have your hand stuck in that narrow position, but actually you can spread those, where obviously where your knuckles and that side of things can spread and move, but
Sure.
just not a huge amount. But that's the thing is, so yeah, I noticed my kind of foot basically changed. And things like balance and stability, it's remarkable. Every day when I see clients in the studio, I test their ability to stand on one leg, and they can't do it. And most people, I'd say 90% plus, cannot stand properly on one leg without their shoes on.
Wow.
And because they're rocky all over the place, their arch is collapsing, they have no sensation, they have no ability to control their what's called ankle joint proprioception. And so I was actually developing, and I got to the point where when I was just doing barefoot running. I was just doing barefoot running, barefoot activity. I wasn't working on my balance at all, but I thought one day I'd try to test it.
Yeah.
So I said, could I stand on one leg with my eyes closed? Yes. Could I stand on one leg with my eyes closed on a ball, like a medicine ball?
Right.
And it turned out I could.
Wow.
Could stand on a ball and grip the ball with my foot and stand on one leg with my eyes closed. So I thought I'd test this, and I actually remember doing it in the middle of a gym, not far away from me. And I was doing it, and I said, I thought to myself, could I stand on one leg with my eyes closed and squat down on one leg on this ball? And I tried it, and I did it, and I opened my eyes and realised that a lot of people were staring at me.
That's awesome.
Because it's something you would never normally see. And
Sure.
And it was kind of like, wow, I've not tried to increase my balance. I've not tried to do anything, but that ability, that sensation, all those changes I got with my foot has given me a foot that now controls the movement and understands and gives input into the brain that allows me to control balance and positioning. And then I've got all these runners coming in, and they wonder why they're injured. They wonder why they've got these things, because every day they strap on a shoe that takes away all their sensation. It takes away all their movement. And it's a bit like if you were to put your whole leg in cast for months and take the cast off, you wouldn't know how. I mean, I've been in this situation. When I was younger, I think this is possibly why I got into running. Was that I dropped what was a large radiator on my leg and had 13 fractures.
Oh,
and was told that I probably wouldn't be able to walk properly again. If not, I would never be able to run. This is when I was about 10, 11 years old. And I think that's what got me. And I was in cast for nearly a year in the end because it wouldn't heal properly and all these issues. And when I came out of cast, not only did I lost lots of muscle mass, but my leg didn't work.
Yeah.
My brain couldn't control it because it couldn't control all the movements that it had lost. And that was, it took probably a year at least to get proper movement and everything back in. And, that's what we're doing with our feet, is that we're locked in that position. We wonder why. And it's because the brain just basically says, well, I'm only getting this singular input almost.
Sure.
Because it's moving, it's not feeling anything. And this is just one kind of offshoot of this. This is why I have a bit of a bugbear with Vibrams being called barefoot running.
Uh-huh.
Barefoot running is the sensation of the bottom of your foot on something.
Yeah.
And it's different because it's those little, every time, if you run on a nice soppit of grass, every little blade of grass that's touching the bottom of your foot that's tickling those sensors is what's doing the good stuff, basically. And having a shoe there is what diminishes that, which is why it's not necessary that we have to all be barefoot, but it's such a great tool to learn those things. When you get people barefoot running on a treadmill, they change their gait really quickly, like within seconds.
It becomes shorter, right? Is that what my guess?
Shorter stride. They start actually they tend to run taller, they use elastic recoil, and it's simply because the amount of sensation they suddenly get within seconds, their brain is overloaded, but it suddenly learns. It's suddenly like, turns all the lights back on. And they never have that because they spend all their time in a shoe that just distributes the force, just doesn't let them feel anything or feel any sensations.
Sure. And when we see, a shoe commercial and it shows us a shoe doing those things, we go, wow, that's cool. This shoe is awesome. I've got to have it. And we forget, no, actually your feet are made to do that already. And I think you made a really good point, though, about kind of the coming out of the cast mentality, because I know a lot of guys are going to listen to this and maybe they're getting ready to start barefoot running. Here in the States, it's getting to be the fall, and so the temperatures are dropping. It's a great time to go start running. And but they're going to experience some discomfort with that, right? It's going to feel awkward initially because your body doesn't know, your brain doesn't know, and your body doesn't know how to work this thing out because it's really not been done, for probably most people's lives. We every time we're walking around, we have shoes on for the most part. So I thought that was a really good point. And I also wanted to jump into some things that would probably keep people from going down this path, which would probably be some misconceptions or some myths that they think. So like for myself, I've already talked about, I have flat feet, ugly looking feet, doctors, whatever would say, don't run. I don't listen to doctors most of the time, but that's probably another topic. But I know, guys are thinking, I have flat feet, or I have ankle problems, or I have arch issues or whatever. I definitely shouldn't be barefoot running. What do you say to people who have that kind of position?
Well, that's the thing, is that I'm of the belief that if you change anything, you can cause yourself problems, but also sometimes they become hypersensitive to those changes. The thing is that often, this is the whole Vibrams debate again, is that Vibrams caused a lot of problems. They did. They caused a lot of fractures in people because people were used to having cushion.
Sure.
Their bones were used to having cushion. Their tissues were used to having cushion. They took it away and they put a set of Vibrams on. They went and run out on tarmac and they did too much too soon. The damage to the bones then caused them to fracture. That's the difference, is that actually being barefoot, but on a nice soft surface to start off with, is the best thing you can do, because instantly it starts getting, and it gets those muscles working. Now, you have to, with any change, whether it's a change in shoes, whatever it is, always take it easy to start off with. You can probably go out and run lots and lots, but it's always best to start off as easy as you can, and try and build things up. But the whole thing is that you suddenly notice that your ankle, you'll feel more, that your ankle will position itself better. The argument against that is that if you got down to that point where you've worn shoes for such a long time and they have supported that abnormal position for such a long time, to then suddenly be given lots of movement might cause problems, particularly as, it's all very well. I always say things like, if you do the same thing with the hands, but we're not bearing weight on the hands.
Sure.
There isn't huge amounts of force going through the hands as we land like there is on the feet. So what I like people to do is really, really pay attention to that, in that they can do it. They can start, but they have to start very easy. They have to start by walking barefoot around their house. Yeah. The amount of people that wear shoes around their house. So start off walking barefoot. Okay. And then walk around your garden, and then do a little bit of trotting. And then doing things like every night. I get them to stand on one leg while they're brushing their teeth. Just literally 2 minutes each day, just standing on one leg, because the amount that can do is quite incredible. The amount of things it can do in terms of and when you get those muscles and everything switched on, yes, things might not be in a perfect position, but as those muscles get switched on, as they actually start controlling the movement, they'll protect those positions if you're conscientious enough and you think about it enough and you pay attention to how you feel and not ignore any niggles that come on and all these things. Yeah. But that's the thing, is that a lot of people, this is the issue I have with a lot of kind of podiatrists and that side of things. So we have a lot of podiatrists in this country, and most of them, I don't think, do a job that is anyway good for their patient clients. Right. Now, there is podiatrists I know now that are not using orthotics. They are retraining the feet and all these things, which is fantastic. That's what they should be doing. They should be taking their knowledge of the feet and helping people get stronger, better feet. They shouldn't be trying to... And I've heard podiatrists say to children that they need to... that every person should be in an insole from the moment they start walking.
Wow.
And I think that is
awful.
ridiculous. If you have that stance, you are ridiculous. Because the foot is, I mean, people like Da Vinci. Da Vinci waxed lyrical about the foot. He wrote pages and pages and pages about how amazing the foot is.
Yeah.
He was obsessed with the foot.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that because he saw how amazing, but also he saw how it was basically kind of not appreciated for its amazing mechanical ability, because the hand could do incredible things, but the foot was doing those incredible things at the same time as supporting our weight, allowing us to balance on one leg and move forward. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
And to have this stance that is broken from the off is ridiculous. And I saw it in paediatric and child orthopedics. Any child that had a slightly lower arch, and this is the whole flat feet, so I'll throw out an argument now. Flat feet don't exist, okay?
Okay.
Flat feet is basically just a normal part of the normal state of a relaxed arch.
Okay.
The foot, not in a, it is, if you, right, it's akin, I say, to basically walking up to someone who's got brown eyes and saying, your brown eyes are wrong, your eyes are meant to be blue, therefore you should be wearing these blue contact lenses, and that's it. It's basically taking a genetic variant, a variant of normal, and saying it is not right.
Wow.
It is not normal. You put these kids in orthotic, and I've done amount of posts I've done about the logic. Okay, so a little bit of a kind of a relationship to history now, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah.
Quick tangent, quick story. Now, there'll be hopefully some engineers out in the audience who will be thinking about, right, an arch bridge. Okay. There's an arch in the bridge that's just like the arch in your foot. Now, if you want to make a stone bridge, and a traditional stone bridge wouldn't use anything, a stone arch, a curved arch, wouldn't use any kind of cement or anything between the stones to hold it together.
Sure.
It is held together by the keystone.
Yep.
The keystone, the one that sits in the middle, and as it pushes down, and as the weight sits on top of the bridge, that keystone distributes the force laterally and out to the sides of the bridge, down the arch. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so if you want to break that arch, you want to break that bridge, what you need to do is you need to push up the keystone.
Right.
So this was used in the World War II, sorry. And basically what happened is, if you ever watch, there's old films of when the Allied troops in the Second World War were going ahead of they were going ahead of the advance and into enemy territory to break, or into basically breaking all, because northern France is full of all these stone arch bridges. Right. But a lot of them have multiple arches to get across big rivers. Okay. And what they realised was that they couldn't blow up the bridge because they couldn't carry enough explosives. They normally had to break loads of these bridges in a very large area. They couldn't carry much explosive. So they couldn't, if you tried to blow a hole in a bridge by putting the explosives on the top, and we've all seen Saving Private Ryan, all those kind of things. The idea is that you try and blow up a bridge from the top, it doesn't work. Right. The way you do it is you put a small line of explosive under the keystone, push the keystone up, and the bridge collapses inwards. Right? Yeah. That's how it works. That's basic engineering. That is exactly how a foot works, i.e. if you push the arch up from the bottom as it's deflecting downwards, you will destabilise it. So an arch support is just the worst thing you could do to a foot. Wow. It destabilises it and it makes it weak. And that's the key thing, is that it doesn't make any sense. Because when you run, you need that arch deflection has been measured at about 17% of energy return. And you can't, and people actually, the funny thing is I get clients come in and they'd be given orthotic. And they say, when I run in this, it really hurts my arch. And I've been told I should never walk or run without it. But it really hurts. And it's like, well, that's because your arch is dropping and hitting it. Yeah. And it's hitting the hard surface. It makes no sense. And that's the thing, is that I did a post, and I'll re-put it because I've just moved websites and I'm trying to get all the posts across. But I did a post talking about, and I think you'll find this quite interesting. I'll put it up and I'll send it to you. Because it's all about the logic of running. Okay. As I actually really think about it, if you really think about the logic of running, and everyone has this ability because everyone understands logic, is that if you look at the foot and you look at a modern running shoe, they are a different shape. Why? And I'll explain in a minute why they are a different shape. But the point is that your logical brain will say, actually, that's not right. Your emotional brain will say that, well, that's what they tell me is good for me. therefore I'm going to believe Nike, Adidas, etc., and all these people that say that you should have an arch support, all this kind of jazz, and you should have a pointed toe box.
Sure.
However, your logic has got to go with the fact that, well, surely a shoe should be the same shape as my foot.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the best argument I can give of this, okay, is, do you own a set of flip-flops? Everyone owns a set of flip-flops.
Yeah.
What shape is a flip-flop?
It's just flat, right?
It's flat with a foot shape, isn't it?
Sure, yeah.
Because if it was tapered, I had the pointed toe box like a running shoe, your big toe would fall off the side and you'd wonder who'd nicked that part of your shoe.
Right, yeah.
And you'd say there's something wrong, yet you put on a normal shoe and it has a pointed toe box.
Sure.
And the reason is, do you know what the real reason that happened is?
No, I have no idea.
Fashion.
Wow.
It's all about fashion. And the reason, so I'll tell you the story. And a great book, if you're into shoes, one of the best books I can recommend reading is Phil Knight's Shoe Dog. So It's all about the creation of Nike. And it is a fascinating story because Phil Knight, the creator of Nike, is an absolutely fascinating, very driven, passionate person. And he worked when he started off with Nike when they were basically importing what has now become Asics. And eventually they then made their own shoe, which became Nike. Sorry.
Yeah.
Nike.
Thanks for the translation there.
Yes, no, we say Nike, even though it's definitely Nike. For some reason, we over here say Nike. I think it's a kind of being stubborn British thing. Anyway, I know now that it's definitely Nike because it's named after the Greek goddess Nike.
Right.
And anyway, so he started off Nike. And when Bill Bowerman was making the first shoes for Nike, the first cushioned insoles, he was using Steve Prefontaine's foot as a guide.
Okay.
So the first shoes that they made were relatively foot-shaped.
Okay.
They basically were a racing flat, which at the time was relatively foot-shaped, or a kind of track flat, and they added cushion to it. And that's all they did. And the first iterations of the Nike, the Cortez, etc., were foot-shaped. They were round at the front. They didn't have this weird, this bit at the front, the kind of the ramp bit that goes at the front. You have this kind of sticky up bit. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't look right at all. No.
It doesn't look. And the thing is that they were round at the front. They were foot-shaped or relatively foot-shaped. They had a narrow heel because we have a narrow heel. They have a relatively low position. And they had a bit of cushion underneath, which Bill Bowerman found increased the economy of his runners, but also helped them when they were doing longer runs.
Okay.
So actually, unfortunately, he then took some advice from a podiatrist who thought that it was a very good idea to support the Achilles by raising up the heel. Okay. Which is not. No. At all. Bad advice. And it ended up with what we've got now, which is almost all shoes have a drop for no apparent reason. Again, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really take strain off the Achilles. All it does is send that strain to the knee and to the hip and other places that actually can't deal with it as well. But the other interesting thing is this toe box was, as I say, relatively foot-shaped. Now, then, and it's really interesting when you listen, I listened to the book actually, and you listen to the story, and it's relatively late on in the story that that Nike then decided that they were in the running market and the runners loved their shoe, but they weren't in the fashion market because nobody was. Yeah. Adidas had tried to produce a fashionable trainer, running shoe, sneaker type thing, and they hadn't been able to do it because people didn't want this kind of basically black, brown trainer thing, and it wasn't fashionable. Nike had the Cortez, which was bright red or blue, or these bright colours, and people loved them. Yeah. But they weren't a fashionable shoe. And they actually changed the shape to make it that slightly pointed shape, because fashionable shoes at the time, as has been for a long time, are pointed, have a tapered toe box. If you look back into like Roman shoes, for instance, when the first fashionable Roman shoes started to exist, not what the ones the soldiers wore, but what the normal people and the rich people wore, they were getting pointed and tapered toe boxes back then. Sure. It's been a fashionable thing for a very, very long time to have a pointed toe box because I don't know whether it's a sign of virility. At one point, certain societies went through when they had shoes that were like kind of jester-type shoes, really, really pointed, like clown shoes, because your length of your shoe was related to various other elements of your body, apparently. So therefore, if you had this long, pointed, thin shoe, that basically showed that you were well endowed or whatever it was. I don't know. It was all related to that kind of rubbish. But the thing is that that's what created the first fashion trainer, fashion kind of shoe. And then, because these factories, because what's happening is at the time, when Nike were producing these shoes, they were getting copied by factories in China who were just making fakes. So they went to those factories and basically said, well, you can make our shoe for us because you're very good at making it. You're making a very good fake, so you can make a real Nike. And so these factories started churning out, and they all churn out the same shoes.
Sure.
Same factories in China producing Nike, producing New Balance, producing all these companies.
Yeah.
And the lasts are the same. This kind of figure of 8 last has stuck for kind of 30, 40 years. And that's why we are stuck where we are. That's why we have pointed trainers, because they are all stuck on that shape.
Wow.
For no reason. And it's all, it's full for fashion. What? Because they then, if you look at things like shoes like Ultras that are foot-shaped,
sure,
people look at, and they look like bowling shoes. They look wrong. They look like and people look at them and think, oh, that's not right.
That's not what a shoe's supposed to look like. Yeah. Yeah, but we got to take it back to what does a foot look like? Yeah, right? And how's a foot supposed to perform? And how does this shoe actually help my foot do that, right? And in most cases, they don't, right? They just mask the performance of the foot. Well, let me we're getting a little bit long here, but I want to wrap this up a little bit. So for the guys that are getting started in this, you've already kind of mentioned, you're going to go out and find some grass, maybe, make sure there's no holes, no gopher holes or something like that in there. But, start running on grass, start doing some barefoot stuff as much as you can during the day. But is it really practical for someone who, has a regular job, they've got to go into work, they're expected to wear shoes? Is it still practical for them to get into barefoot running when so much of their day is still spent in a shoe? Or do they need to really, maybe first think about, I gotta get some footwear that allows my feet more liberty to move. So when I am wearing shoes, it's not such a crazy transition from I'm wearing shoes now, but then it's, after work, I'm going to go for a run. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, that's what I say. This is the problem that I see kind of on a daily basis is often the problem isn't with the running shoes and isn't what they're doing in terms of the running side of things. It's the fact that they spend the majority of their day in the kind of men, and men are worse because they've got these kind of black dress shoes that are manipulating the foot. But there is alternatives. Viva Barefoot are a good example. They do a range of normal black leather shoes that are great for work. They not only are relatively foot shaped. Now, the key thing about the whole foot shape thing is it's not all about width.
Okay. You
can have a wider fitting shoe, but if it still tapers where the big toe is on the inside, it's a problem.
Okay.
Whereas you look at Viva Barefoot, they are wide fitting. However, the key thing is they allow the big toe to sit in its natural position. That's the key thing. So you have this kind of outpouch to the inside. So that means you can get away with a shoe that looks relatively normal. Doesn't look like a clown shoe in terms of width.
Right.
But allows the big toe to sit in that position. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can get these leather shoes. And they also, the other thing about Viva Barefoot as an example is that they don't have any, you're almost on the ground. So all you have is a rubber sole and that's it.
Okay.
And you start wearing that and you start realizing how comfortable that actually is. And how actually, when your foot is allowed to spread, you don't get any hot spots underneath your feet. And this is the same with running as well. Well, the shoe that I'm developing is going to be relatively minimally cushioned because you actually don't need it. You find the reason we've ended up with what's called kind of maximal cushioned running shoes and these Hokas and all these very, very tall shoes is that when you narrow the foot and narrow that position, you make a very small contact area. So obviously you're going to increase the depth of the cushion to try and make things more comfortable.
Yep.
However, if you actually increase the width, allow the foot to naturally spread as it lands, that spreading, that movement absorbs so much of that energy over a large area that actually it suddenly feels really comfortable. And that's the key. So it was almost like this weird misconception that you need depth of cushion to make things feel comfortable. And that's the same, but you can do that with your work shoes. So you can have these dress shoes like Viva Barefoot as an example. And then that means you're not undermining, as you say, you're not undermining the good work that you would do out of that. It is always good, and I tell people if they're not going to change that, and the first thing they do is they get home is rip their shoes off, get their feet out, get the socks off. Because socks, the funny thing is, people say, I walk around in socks.
Yeah, no.
I've seen people with wide feet put on narrow and tight-fitting socks that constrain the foot as much almost as a shoe can.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing is they think, the socks doesn't do much at all. It's like, well, if the sock's too small, it can drag that foot in. It can really compress the foot down. Get the feet out. Get them exposed. Get them, you wouldn't want to wear gloves all day.
Sure.
You want to get your hands out and get, you feel horrible if you wear gloves all day. So get the feet out as well. And that's the thing, is that's a really good start. But then the amount of people, so when I come and work with the runners, they're always surprised how little running they do, particularly on the first visit. They run for about 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then we look at their running, we say, right, that's your running, right, we're putting that aside for now. Right. And I ask them, what do they do as a job? How much time do they spend sitting? How much time do they spend walking around in those inappropriately shaped shoes?
Sure. Because
those things are far more important to their life and their running and all those things and their movement than the 5% of their week they might actually spend running.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing, is that but the thing is that we are, unfortunately, we are stuck in this loop of comfort in the world. Like right. we need to, let's take a quick example. And I talk about it in terms of sitting. So sitting and chairs have changed over the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
30, 40, 50 years ago, your sofa was like a bench. It was rock hard.
Sure.
I remember my nan's sofa. You didn't want to sit on that. You had to have 10 cushions to even sit on the thing. Ridiculous. You want to sit on more than that for 5 minutes, and if you did, you'd fidget around. My sofa now, this modern sofa, is like this big kind of poofy thing that you could just crane. You could sit for hours. And the brain, you've got to remember, you've got a primal brain that is after a few things. It is after food, sex, and basically saving energy, so it can do more food and sex, basically. So if you give it comfort, it grabs it with both hands.
Yeah.
And if you lie on a nice sofa, there's something in the back of your brain that says, don't move. This is so nice. Sit here all day. And we've all been in that situation. Something in our head just tells us it doesn't want to get up and move. Yet when we move, we feel great.
Sure.
But when we don't move, and when we're in those chairs, we're told not to move almost. So we've done that with sofas. Car seats. Old style car seats used to be like a bench, and you'd sit relatively upright.
Yeah.
And you basically, and now you have bucket seats.
Sure.
They're all in these deep seats, these kind of sport. And I remember my mum. I'm only 30, and I remember my mum 20 years ago saying, only sports cars have bucket seats. Now every car has a bucket seat. Mm-hmm. Recently, I drove from north of England to the Alps in France. 15, 20 hours of driving. At one point, driving 6 hours in one stint without stopping. Now, the only way I could have done that is with a car seat that cradled me beautifully. Yeah. But after that 6 hours, I couldn't move. I literally was so locked in that position, I had to spend about an hour moving around to try and even basically function properly as a human.
Sure.
Now, a car seat was designed to do that, but it's not a good thing. It's causing us to seek this comfort. And same with an office chair, I said before, is that your office chair has been designed to make you super comfortable in your office chair so you can be, and it's all about the businesses. This is the key thing.
Yep.
It's productivity.
Yep.
If they can lock you in a position where you don't want to move, you don't even want to get up and go to the toilet or get a drink of water, you will hopefully be more productive. If they sat you on a stool, which is far better for the rest of your life and your back and all these things, you'd fidget so much that actually you probably get more work done because actually you'd be more alert. However, they think that you probably fidget and move more, therefore you wouldn't be as productive.
Yep.
And that's the thing, is that's why it's worthwhile them spending money on office chairs, because it keeps people in that position. And you look around offices, no one stands up anymore. Everyone's sat almost all day in that position. Now, if you put them all on stools, they'd be up and about all the time. And they'd probably be happier. They'd probably work better. They'd probably talk to their colleagues and learn better and use each other better. And that's the thing, is that we have this thing in the back of our brain, this primal thing that makes us search for comfort, because we are trying to save energy so that we can, when we need it, expend it a lot on trying to chase something or run away from something or do something else.
Yeah.
So, that's what people have got to bear in mind, that these things have been given to us. They are that search for comfort, but when we depend on them, or we rely on them, that's when we start to get problems.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, I think about the guys that are listening to this and they're thinking, okay, I get the barefoot thing. I can see how it would be a challenge. And some people may want to shy away from it just because it's an odd thing still. I mean, if I walk around my neighborhood, if I walk my dogs barefoot, I've got people who look at me and go, you don't have any shoes on? Where are your shoes? You're raised in a barn type of thing. But you got to understand that the same thing happened with the people that now have standing desk, right? There was somebody initially that said, I think I'm going to stand up and do some work, here, even though I'm at a computer all day, I'm going to stand up and do that. Or I'm going to get more mobile. I'm going to, stretch in the office and that kind of stuff. You look kind of weird, but that kind of stuff is more acceptable now because somebody began doing that. And so in order for us to make changes in the way society sees bare feet and some of these other things that you mentioned, somebody's got to go first. Somebody's got to make those changes, right? So you've got to have more people out there running in the fields and, and that kind of stuff than you would have had previously. And so it's absolutely right. Guys, if you feel like this is the right thing to do, if this is the right, direction for you, if it's going to help you run better, be more athletic, it's going to keep you from getting injured over and over again like it has for me, then you definitely need to pick this up. And look, I just want to say thanks so much to you, Mr. Hughes, because this has been a great conversation. I know we could keep going and talking about this because there's so much to be explored on this topic. I really look forward to seeing those shoes when you come out with them. So, if you have a prototype, when that kind of gets in the works, shoot me an email. I'll make sure everybody else gets a chance to see it. And I'm excited about seeing a change in how we think about barefoot activities and that kind of stuff. And I appreciate your thoughts on this. So thank you so much.
No problem at all.
Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media networks. And look, if you got something out of this, make sure another guy does too. Share the episode and make sure it gets in front of the guys that need to hear it the most. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.